Welcome to Work Worth Doing, where we promote meaningful work with meaningful relationships and talk all things hiring, leadership, and building a great team. I'm TJ Castning.
Thanks, TJ. I'm Louis Swingrover. Today's episode is called The Puzzle Piece Problem: Why Hiring Isn't Just About Skills.
So, when we work with clients, a lot of times they say, bring us good people. And we know what they mean by that. What they mean is bring people that can perform in our organization. And what recruiting has taught us is that good fit is a retrospective thing that we label people with if they succeed. And oftentimes we end up saying, though, they weren't a good fit. And I've been on a journey. We've been on a journey for the last 10 years to figure out what is fit. And I want to break it down into a few categories. So there's fit to the job. Let's say a project manager, right? This person is going to have a certain degree of managerial responsibility for a project or multiple projects, and they need to perform that well, right? Schedule, budget, client relationships, coordination, etc. But that's not where the fit problem stops. You've also got fit to the leader, their direct boss. It's been said very well that people don't quit jobs, they quit leaders. And then you've got fit to the team. So they need to fit into the team dynamics. They need to have good synchronization with the rest of the team. They need to fit with the culture of the business. And so those alignments take quite a bit of time to deduce and ascertain because they have to synchronize with the motivations, interests, nature of the candidate. And it strikes me that a lot of times hiring is a bit of a side project, so to speak, for people who are otherwise engaged in the business of the business, which for our clients is construction. They're focused rightly on building well. And so when it comes time to hire a particular role, oftentimes it's that hiring process is competing for time and attention, energy with other truly important priorities and responsibilities. This is something that we guide our clients through navigating. But the process of assessing all these different types of fit is a particular one. It's nuanced. It's different with each candidate because the breadth of human complexity.
Yeah, well, I'll say a few things. When we use language like fit, when we use fit talk, we're invoking ultimately what it might be considered a metaphor. A puzzle piece can fit. You can fit into a pair of jeans. When we use fit talk, we invoke visual metaphors like you might fit a puzzle piece into that exact puzzle piece's shaped hole in the puzzle. When we talk about people, we're not talking about puzzle pieces. We're talking about something much more like ingredients. What can happen from time to time when we're working with a client who has a need is that they will describe more than one profile that might fit their need. It's not as though they have a puzzle on the table and they need a candidate who fits precisely the lines that they have etched out for us in like a job description or something like that. It's that they have a team. They have a whole soup of people with complementary flavors. And on one hand, you might complement the other flavors in the soup by introducing a savory meat like an Italian sausage. On the other hand, a pepperoni might do. But for certain palates, throwing in some beans might do the trick. And you might wind up with a vegetarian chili like my wife makes, and it's quite good, even though I myself am not a committed vegetarian. Nobody's perfect. So when we talk about fit, sometimes what we mean is that there might be a synergy or a complementarity or some array of strengths, skills, ability, knowledge that can be added to the situation to make the functional whole capable of achieving its ends. You might hire someone at a higher starting base salary who brings commensurate level of experience and skills for a role that you were originally looking for someone much more in their mid-career to fill. And it might be worth it to you. So when we talk about fit, we are meaning to pick out some real features about the situation, but not always meaning to pick out something that is definite, precise, and predictable.
Yeah, and the truth of this is seen in the fact that when we match somebody with a client, it's never the person they described to us. There's things that rhyme, things that are similar, but the reality is we're never matching the imaginary person we initially described. There's one other facet to this as well, which is the maturity of the organization or the calcification of the roles. And this can be good or bad. Sometimes you've got very established, mature organizations that know they have very tight definitions for what a role is because their processes are fully baked and they need a specific person to fit into this process. And if the person is not particularly well aligned with this exact role, there's going to be problems. And this is much more akin to a puzzle piece on the spectrum. And I would say we run into this fairly infrequently. More often, businesses are a little bit more free flowing with process and how they solve problems. And so we, on the other end of this spectrum is what we call a soup, where we're looking to add good ingredients to the soup, but it's not necessarily that the person has it. They must meet a certain a shape. What I mean by that is a certain number of years of experience or a very specific personality, a very a specific process that they follow every single time. For example, a lot of the contractors that we work with, everybody has a position they call a superintendent or a project manager. And the reality of these roles is radically different. The responsibilities are radically different. You've got supers that put on bags and that don't, and that lead other supers and don't, and project managers who are really more of a superintendent or a hybrid, and sometimes they're doing pre-con and sometimes they're not. And what the hiring authority is trying to do is not find exactly this person. They're trying to find somebody who furthers the goals of the business, the success of the team. And that could come in, a variety of, flavors to keep the soup analogy going. And so fit is something that we need to think about for the organization and the maturity level of the organization. But then we can talk about fit to the leader. You got thoughts on fit to the leader, Louis?
Yeah, sure. I'm just taking a second to reflect on and process what you just said. Often, an organization knows that they have a pain that they want resolved, or they have an ambition that they want to pursue. And they have the realization that adding an individual or multiple individuals to the team is important for effectively resolving that pain or pursuing that goal. The things like job descriptions are reflect an organization's attempt to approximate one persona or one attempt at describing a kind of person that might help them resolve this pain or effectively pursue this goal. I would like to make a note about this and how it indicates the importance of investment into the discovery process. We can tell that a client might not be a good fit for working with us when they want to skip the discovery process. They don't want to invest time into helping us understand the nature of their pain or the nature of their goal. They may or may not trust that we're capable of bringing critical thinking, reasoning, analytical, and creative problem solving to bear on helping them advance their goals or resolve their pain. And so they might not be willing to invest the time to help us understand it. Or in some cases, they might not be reflective. They might not understand the nature of their need in the first place. And it takes a little bit of prompting and some consultative skill from people like us to help draw that out from them. And so, I personally get sick jollies when I hear someone say, "Oh, you now understand my need better than I understood it myself when I first came to you, when I first reached out to you." And this puts your recruiter in a fantastic position to help you resolve the issue and pursue your goals, instead of just saying, "Just find me a good super on the East Bay." Well, what is a good super to you, to the project, to this leader? There's a big difference there. So sometimes we're able to talk with a client and help them understand their need to understand or understand their need to help us understand, so that then we can go do good work on their behalf. I wanted to say some things sort of in this zone. But your question, TJ, then was about fit to the leader. to the particular manager? Yeah, this can go uh, in a few different ways. There might be a case where someone is a fit generally to the org, to the role, but not to their manager, or where someone might be a fit to the organization generally, a fit to the role, and maybe wouldn't be a good fit if they were being recruited for a position that reports directly to senior leadership, but is a good fit if they're going to be onboarded into a role that reports to somebody else. Um, the chemistry that you have with your manager or with your direct report might be different in a way that's acceptable to the chemistry that they might have with another department head or with senior leadership. Obviously, they have to believe in the mission of the organization and buy into its values. They have to believe that senior leadership has integrity and will do right by their clients and their staff. But they don't necessarily need to have chemistry with senior leadership if they won't be reporting to them. What they do need is to have some effective ratio, some effective mixture of dynamics with their direct manager in order to be able to communicate effectively, collaborate and coordinate toward common ends, and to work together well on a team.
Ex-
Yeah, go
I
ahead. You
want
have some
to
things to
give a
say there.
practical example because we're talking in abstract right now. We had a client want to hire a an ops position, and this was a real learning moment for me in this because we found a fantastic ops manager, very impressive, great communication skills, and we saw a lot of conflict. We saw a lot of challenge, and it's very puzzling because on the face of it, like this is really the type of candidate that I think many companies would desperately want to hire. But there's a particular mismatch in the personality with the leader, and we'll get to responsibilities of leadership. But this leader was a high visionary and presented a certain operational chaos that this ops manager was supposed to quell, and he couldn't. He can't quell it because the owner of the business has a very large lever, and he's new to the organization. And so this is an example of how you can have great people on both sides. But by the way, both people are fantastic, but the way in which their personalities and their strengths coincide, the way they relate to each other, the way they fit together, the way they accommodate each other is incredibly important. Um, and and it bears in mind that the responsibility for fit, I believe, primarily falls with leadership because the leader owns the culture, owns the organization from a responsibility standpoint. Whether or not they actually own the business or not, it's not what I mean. But they control these factors. They control the interview process. They control the roles and responsibilities. And so it's incumbent upon leaders to think about how do I meld myself with all these various people that report to me. And one thing we notice in recruiting is you've got one leaders, there's this spectrum. On one side of the spectrum, you've got leaders who demand everybody sort of accommodate them, and they use their authority to ensure that they are accommodated. And then you have leaders who are more self-aware, and they recognize that their strengths are to be maximized and their weaknesses are to be mitigated, and they're accountable to those weaknesses. They seek to accommodate those weaknesses by finding people to collaborate with, to work with. And these leaders who are more accommodating are vastly more successful at building successful teams. And so when a client tells us, "Hey, find me someone good," right? That's part of what runs through our head is what does good mean to you? How narrow is the personality spectrum that you can effectively work with? If they're a really strong superintendent and they're cranky every single morning, can you work with that? Because there's some leaders who can and some leaders who can't. And whether or not that candidate is a good candidate for you doesn't have any bearing really on them, right? It's not a reflection of their goodness or badness. This is about the fit between you. So I want to encourage leaders, think about how you accommodate people. Think about how you're self-aware and you can be aware of their personality nuances, of your personality nuances. This is why we do the job fit assessment with PXT and the retention coaching. There's a deep well, and I'm frankly very much still in the learning curve myself of learning how to fit my personality to my team.
TJ, let's talk about this thing that you mentioned, the PXT, and how it has instrumental value in helping a leader to understand themselves and their team and a potential candidate when they're trying to fill a role. What is the PXT? How does it work? What is its value, and how is it best used in order to help a leader assess fit?
Let's start with the problem. So why? Why PXT? Here's the problem. How many times have you hired somebody only to discover something about the way they operate or think that you didn't discover in the interview process that has a material impact on something important, the team, the role, whatever it is? And you could think of good things or bad things, right? Sometimes you get lucky and you just didn't know it was going to be this good, or sometimes you didn't know it was going to be this bad. And this is a problem that we've puzzled on for a long time because we've found a lot of great people, sent them into an organization we have a high esteem for, and then just watch it go like cats and dogs. What in the world? And then Ambassador shares hiring risk with clients, right? And so you feel like you've done everything you can to find a good client, to find a good candidate. No one's perfect. You try to run a good process, and then they go in and there's conflict. What in the world? This is a big problem. So PXT. The problem that we're seeing here is that people are complicated. The hiring manager is complicated, maybe more than they know. A lot of times we humans think that other people are like us. Why don't they think like us? And the reality is you are one of one. There's only one TJ, there's only one Louie. And the more we can understand about how radically unique we are, the better we can appreciate how radically unique the other people are that we work with. And when we're hiring, we need to start getting an appreciation of how radically unique is this person. So how do we do this? What kind of tool, right? Because we can ask them all sorts of questions, but to be honest with you, a lot of people's ability to specify about these unique things about themselves is somewhat limited. Against what context are we talking about our uniqueness? So PXT. How I found out about PXT was a client of mine hired a sales role. They were working with another consultant for this tool. I had never experienced the tool, and the hire was a failure. And I'm just utterly demoralized. And then they tell me, yeah, I ran a lot of stop signs in that hire. And I'm like, wait, what? I'm just hearing about this now. Yeah, we ran this assessment, and there's all these warning signs about this person's fit to the role. And so we looked at it, and sure enough, this assessment had clear warning indicators that were ignored through the process. And that inspired me to get in touch with this consultant, Kim Leifson, who now works with us doing retention consulting and helping clients through this assessment process, this job fit assessment. And what it does is it gives you data that allows you with expertise to look around the corner and have a detailed conversation about where will there be friction in this job? Where will things probably go pretty well? And where will people's proclivities around the pace at which they work, or their level of agreeableness or disagreeableness, or their sociability? There's 9 factors that it's measuring. How are these things going to show up in the role, and how are they going to contribute to the proverbial, the soup? Do you keep using that analogy? And so it's an intensive tool. It's about a 45-minute assessment. there's math, there's all sorts of behavioral questions. It's no joke. But I can't hire without it at this point. I can't, because it feels like driving on a curvy road and then turning off your headlights in the dark, right? Immediate discomfort, because I've got problems and I can't see them coming. Having this job fit assessment is so valuable to be able to see the fundamental nature, the fundamental wiring of people, the God-given wiring particular to them, and then also the God-given wiring of the person they're going to report to, because that fit is the first thing to be factored for. They have to get along. They have to build respect and rapport and loyalty. And so we can look at that, having assessed the direct hiring authority, having assessed the candidate, and help them model and predict and plan for what's going to take to make this relationship successful. Because that is the responsibility that every hiring authority has, whether they realize it or not. It's not to observe the candidate and judge them for how good or bad they are. It's to think about, can I be responsible for this person's success? Do I have what it takes? Am I ready to invest the time and the energy? It's that's a complicated process. So PXT job fit, it's amazing.
Yeah, I think what a candidate looks like on paper might be akin to uh, a written description of the quality of some ingredient. But before you throw it in your soup, you're going to want to sample its flavor. Um, I think uh, I think a lot of hiring authorities do resonate with us when we talk about gelling with the team and chemistry and this sort of thing. Like, oh yeah, of course, that's why we need to interview them. That's why we need to have an on-site. We need to have them meet the team. We want multiple perspectives, maybe an informal connection, and there's a resonance there. But what we're able to do when we engage in our process of discovery and then with the PXT is that we're able to gain additional insight through quantitative measures as well as qualitative measures that provide that turn on the lights, they turn on the headlights, turns on the flashlight to illumine the situation. I like this analogy of seeing around the corner. You know that it's important, but not everyone knows how much risk can be mitigated through the process of structured reflection prompts and discussion and dialogue with people who are students of hiring problems, and then with structured, normalized assessments like the PXT. Um, Another thing that this helps, that this process, this PXT process helps, is that it helps to widen the talent pool. It helps to give you insight and access to a broader range of individuals who might be able to help you solve your problem and pursue your goals, because it can illuminate not just where potential conflict will be coming down the road and give you a heads up, but also where their strengths are. And sometimes a strength will show up on a PXT that isn't evident from a quick gloss of their resume. And this confers an advantage to your business because it gives you access to the particular arrays of strengths and weaknesses across a wider, diverse, and more diversified talent pool than maybe your competitors are accessing. And that's really special. So there's the risk mitigation standpoint that we know vibe is important, we know chemistry is important, but here you have a tool that can help you increase the likelihood of good chemistry, or it can give you a diagnostic heads up about how to hedge and where to work and when problems and conflict arise, because we're all human, how to handle them. And so it increases the likelihood of a good fit or a good complementarity or an effective, durable hire. And then it also illumines for you potential advantages and potential strengths of candidates that maybe are already committed to, and now you get to leverage and appreciate and see, or candidates that you might not have otherwise considered if these features weren't illuminated for you by processes very much like the PXT, including the PXT.
To bring it back to fit, fit is something that should be assessed in the interview process, but it's also something that should be cultivated in the interview process. And then in the the onboarding and retention process, it needs to be maintained and further cultivated. And that's one more reason why the PXT and the job fit assessment is so powerful, is because it starts giving you ideas of how to do that, particular to this person. And so if in your organization you have leaders who are accountable for the success of the people underneath them, they're going to need a tool to do that. And this tool carries a tremendous amount of weight, frankly, years and years that it would take to figure these things out about people if you're studying it. And for most leaders, they're just simply unaware of these factors. And I believe that and one of the reasons why I'm excited to talk about this stuff and do this podcast is there's a tremendous amount of economic inefficiency in our companies, in our organizations, because people are just failing to recognize the unique facets of each other. And they don't necessarily have the tools to work productively with those facets. It's not a good or bad thing. Like you were talking about strengths and weaknesses. A real appreciation of a strength is to also realize that unchecked, it's a weakness. And that weaknesses in different contexts are strengths. And so the question of, hey, what are your strengths and weaknesses? It's not a simple one. If that gets asked in an interview, there are some jobs where you want them to be a perfectionist. There are some jobs that if they're a perfectionist, they will fail utterly. And so the question is not, what are your strengths, as if there's like some little bullet point list. It's a constantly moving equilibrium that every leader has a deep responsibility to manage and support each person in the management of those strengths and weaknesses. One of the things I'm particularly proud of in the job fit assessment is the level of self-awareness that candidates also receive in this process. They get an interpretation, and interview processes are often criticized for being kind of ambiguous or vague to candidates. They don't really know what's going on. They don't know what questions are going to be asked. They go in not knowing a whole lot. And here we're investing in their self-awareness. And many times candidates have looked at this same data and realized, like, I don't want to work with this leader. I'm leaving my last job because I work for a leader exactly like this. And we're doing everyone a big favor about highlighting that now, rather than letting them work together and discover that through 6 painful months where they all have to start over after that.
I think that's a good point. The PXT isn't something that you pass or fail. Like a lot of these assessments, we also use the VOPS assessment and the Kolbe. And what matters is one's fitment, suitability for a role. You want your pillow to be soft and your hammer to be hard. A hard pillow doesn't help you sleep, and a soft hammer doesn't help you drive nails. Um, so whether some feature, some descriptive feature of some person counts as a strength is going to be relative to the goals that they will be helping to advance in a particular role. So I think that's a good point to make there. It can be intimidating or scary to take what feel like are tests as a candidate, and where they might be assessments or psychographic measures. That can be intimidating too, or it can be off-putting to someone who sees themselves as the unique snowflake that they are, and doesn't want to be labeled or put in a box. But of course, that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to get to know them even better.
Outside the
Than
box.
Yeah. What's that? Outside the box?
Outside the box.
Right. Sure. Yeah,
And we do that
absolutely.
with the hiring authority too, right? So that is a good point. I resent assessments that are unilateral, that are just sort of judging the candidate. I think that's a gross underestimation of what fit means. And what we really need to do is judge the fit between the two and judge the leader's ability to manage that fit, take ownership and accountability for that fit. That's what high performance leadership is really all about. It strikes me that when you ask a company, including if you ask me, like, what's your culture? That's not an easy question to answer, because you can spill so many words trying to describe it. And I ran across a quote the other day that started helping me understand why this is the case. And the quote was, I'll have to find the attribution, but it was that analyzing culture passively is often not possible. You have to provoke it to really understand what it is and what drives it. And this resonated because another thing I've learned is that culture is defined at the edges of issues. What I mean by that is if you have everything going well in the business, it's making lots of money and everybody's happy, culture is easy. It's really not that hard to have a good place to work, solve problems when business is easy. But where culture is really put into the limelight is when things are hard. That's when you find out what the culture really is. Is there a culture of accountability or blame shifting? Is there a culture of collaboration or siloing, for example? And so a lot of times people think when they think about their culture, they think about the good days. Oh, we've got, the classic beer keg and ping pong and unlimited PTO and all these things. And it's fine. Those are not bad things, but what really is driving culture in a profound sense that actually attracts people, retains them, or weeds them out is how does the organization or team or leader react when someone makes a mistake? When someone challenges the boss in front of everybody else? When a client is unhappy? When revenue is not where it needs to be? What what does the company do? How does everybody behave? What are the rules for this behavior? How do we think about this kind of problem? And it may be the case that, a lot of our cultures haven't necessarily been fully tested. Like we don't fully know. I think in a lot of ways I've been discovering the ambassador group culture over the years, as we've run into problems and I've failed as a leader and then had to learn like, oh, I need to upskill in these areas so that I can actually install a good culture when it comes time to face this kind of a problem. And so when we think about candidate fit to culture, I would propose what we're actually processing is how does this person react to some kind of problem, trauma, issue that's going to test their character, that's going to test their skill set, their collaboration, their integrity, their accountability. And is that going to align with what we believe is the right way to react in these types of situations? Um, to put all that simply, does the person react under pressure the same way the organization reacts under pressure? Because if it's aligned, if it's similar, if the organization can define that and install that in people that they hire, then your chance of going through some sort of episode together whole is much better than waiting to see what happens when, hey, the schedule's slipping. I hired the superintendent. I thought they're a good superintendent, but they're not handling this problem how I want them to handle this problem. Well, of course not, right? We haven't defined how to handle the problem. We haven't given them core values that they are expected to see, the lens through which they're to see these problems. And so once again, a lot of this recruiting thing and hiring goes back to leadership. It goes back to leaders defining intentionally, not accidentally, what is our culture and how does our leadership impress this culture and these standards upon our team in a correct way, and how do we bring that to bear in the interview process, in the assessment process, and the onboarding process, so that when we encounter challenges together, the candidate knows how to be culturally aligned, with the company, and the company knows how to behave it. And then can we go through these dramas with very little consternation internally, just working hard to solve the problem?
Something that you said got my gears turning. I think the language that you used was in describing an individual, a candidate, reacting to pressure in the same way as an organization. And I'm wondering if there isn't a way that we can explore that further and maybe nuance it or enrich what we mean by that, by the same. And here's what I mean. Um, uh, when you and I face a difficulty, we face a certain pressure, and there are a variety of pressures on both of us and as individuals and as a leadership team. But when you and I react to certain kinds of pressures, um, from time to time, uh, one of us might step back to think, the other might spring into action. And in other contexts, those roles might be reversed. And across contexts, our reactions might be complementary to one another. There might be a time where you're discouraged and I'm able to carry the team morale a little bit, or vice versa. And so when we talk about the way that a candidate reacts to different kinds of pressures, um, there's quite a lot to explore. Uh, in your illustration, we talked about deadlines, and I do think that where there's a scope change, or there's a mistake made on the job site, and we're responsible for maintaining a tight adherence to the timeline, and to the deadline. It certainly puts not merely one's character or the team's culture on display, but it also puts our values on display. Or maybe we could construe values as being constitutive of culture or proper parts of culture or something like this. So where it might be a value of one team to stay with the problem, stay with the job site, even when subs are quitting, even when foremen are quitting, um, or we're needing to change who we're working with for one or another trade. It might be a cultural value, a point of pride and integrity, to maintain the level of quality, and the intolerance of margin and error while adhering to the deadline, even if it means working late, working extra, going in on the weekends, and really pushing through. Those kinds of values will need to be shared by someone that you're expecting to carry the day when things go haywire.
Yeah. The book Five Dysfunctions of a Team, Patrick Lencioni, author, has been pretty impactful on you and I. In that book, Five Dysfunctions of a Team talks about how conflict is not to be avoided. We have to have conflict. In fact, he talks about meetings being boring and pointless if there's not conflict. And this is an example culturally of how we think about conflict, and we want conflict. We want ideas to compete. We keep our ego out of it, or we try to. But the expectation is that, if TJ has a dumb idea, it doesn't matter that he is the founder of the business, because if the newest member of the team has a better idea, then that needs airtime, and TJ's
Let's use a
idea.
realistic example, though.
uh, hey, this has happened before. I've had my share of dumb ideas. Um, it just doesn't matter. We're not getting our egos all wrapped up in the hierarchy of ideation. Our ego is subordinated to our mission. And that can be a cultural value, right? Ego is subordinated to mission. And what does that mean? Here's all the behavioral examples of ego subordinated to mission, right? It is showing up late. It is having your idea get thrown in the trash can. It is being accountable for a mistake that didn't serve the mission. Um, Quality standards. One thing fascinating to me is how few written quality standards I see out there within construction companies. They have a whole culture around quality. It's on their website. Hey, we build these great buildings, quality process. I've seen very few, and I think there's a great opportunity here. Create clarity about what actually is our quality standard in project management, in the craft, in our concrete, in our framing, in our all the factors, right? What's our quality standard with a relationship with our employees, with our trade partners, with our architects? What are these standards that we are striving for, and making those explicit so that people can meet those goals? Because again, we're trying to hire good people into these environments where good is actually incredibly subjective. And what's good enough on this project is different than what's good enough on this project. And how much economic inefficiency, how much just waste are we seeing in our business just because as leaders we haven't defined these things for the people who are joining our organization, are very sincere, well-intentioned, skilled even, and just don't have the tools to make the leader happy. It's a problem that we've been studying for a long time. We're going to keep studying, and we need partners to do it with. We need companies that want to go on this journey with us, that want to take advantage of these tools and save themselves a lot of time. We like to say we turn stress into confidence with the work that we do, and we save our clients hundreds and hundreds of hours, not just in the search process, but avoiding rework in the hire, helping leaders take accountability for hires that they can be committed to. So if this is you, we hope that you'd subscribe to the channel. We love sharing. Leave us a comment if you have questions, if you have thoughts. We'd love to hear them. We'd love to engage with those things. Get this less of a monologue and more of a conversation. And then you can sign up for an exploratory conversation with me if you're interested in discussing these factors and how they might be able to serve your business and the growth of your team. I'd be pleased to meet with you. See ya.